Baltimore Ravens have made another trade, but it's not bringing anybody in. It's sending somebody out. We talk about that, where the Ravens go from here, and so much more coming up on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are here. It is Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today or this evening on Saturday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We are free and available for you all podcasting platforms, video form, audio form. And thank you so much for being a part of the show here today and every day. If you're an everyday or if you're a first-time listener, thank you for tuning in. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We do have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. And obviously, we have the regular show Monday through Friday, but the plus more includes instant reaction shows like this. And we're reacting today to the Ravens not bringing in a piece. They made a trade. They didn't bring in anybody. They moved off of a player in Jaire Alexander. Now, this writing was on the wall. We'll talk about the move. We'll talk about what it means. We'll talk about if the Ravens are gearing up for moves, what they got. I mean, look, there's a lot to dive into here, but, just clearly off the bat did not work. So we'll talk about everything here on the show today. Want to remind everyone before we get started, today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. So, yeah, Jaire Alexander, he is gone. As I said a minute ago, it felt like this writing was on the wall. Jaire barely played for the Ravens this season. And look, if you've been listening to me for years on Locked On Ravens, you know how much I wanted to see Jaire in a Ravens uniform. I wanted him badly. And, we finally get it. At the time, I thought it was an incredible move, and I still kind of do. But the problem is it just became a weird situation from the jump where Jaire missed time during training camp with that injury. And then he comes back for the Buffalo game, but clearly shouldn't have been playing. He ends up costing the Ravens. It wasn't just Jaire, but he was a big reason why they lost that game was Jaire and, some of the plays that he was involved in, tackling Keon Coleman instead of letting him score to give the offense the ball back. And then he misses more time. And the Ravens and John Harbaugh kind of, I don't know if spinning is the right word, but they are, putting it out there that, hey, he needs to be able to get back into game shape and this, that, and the other. And then he comes back for the Texans game. And then, he plays in that Texans game a little bit. And then, just became a healthy scratch. And Rappaport reported he was a healthy scratch over the weekend against, the Bears and then the Dolphins, just really, really weird stuff. So the trade is Jaire is now in Philadelphia. The Eagles, Harry Roseman makes a move for Jaire. It's Jaire and a 2027 7th round pick to the Eagles for a 2026 6th rounder. Now, Alexander, again, only played in those 2 games this season. It was probably a mutual decision where Jaire clearly at this point, he's probably healthy enough to get out there and play, with Ian Rappaport saying he's a healthy scratch and whatnot. And I would have liked to see the Ravens try it with him. I would have. I thought that for Baltimore, having him in the fold, I still think when healthy, a top 10 corner. I'm not going to waver on that. But the problem with Jaire has been the injuries. And when he's not healthy, when he's not available, he's not helping anybody. But he was healthy enough, it felt like, to play in some of these games. And the Ravens, just personnel-wise, probably didn't trust him. I don't know what the situation is. But for Baltimore, if you don't have a plan, and this is what I said. I said on Twitter on Thursday, on social media on Thursday, if they're not going to use Jaire, just trade him away. Just seriously. And I thought that maybe they could have put him in a package for an edge guy or a D lineman or an O lineman. That didn't happen. Baltimore just moved off of him for, draft capital. But, at the end of the day, this move was a necessary one if the Ravens didn't have a plan. And, clearly that was it. And Jets Rebeck at The Athletic, he reported and put out there that the Ravens are playing 3 safeties now for the majority, if not at all times. So right now, even for guys like Chidobe Awuzie and TJ Tampa, there's just not a lot of snaps for reserve guys right now. And, he was behind those guys. So there was really no playing time for him. I think Jaire is still talented enough to play and contribute. Again, I would have liked to see it in Baltimore, but with the way they've kind of shifted things a little bit, it's just it wasn't in the cards for Jaire. So I'm bummed about it. I'm disappointed, but I'm happy that they made the move if there wasn't playing time and there wasn't a plan, because there are a couple of other things that you can take away from this deal that could help Baltimore make even more trades. And we'll talk about that a little more in the second part of the show. But Brian McFarland of Ravens salary cap, he put it together here where the Ravens are, and I see it in the chat. They're freeing up a roster spot, and that's really big, right? Because now the Ravens, you can trade away a guy, or like you did trade away a guy in Jaire Alexander. Now, if you want to bring in somebody, you don't have to send a player out or cut a guy. That roster spot is free. But what this also does is it creates $2 million in cap space. And Brian also notes that there will need to be someone else to, you got to add someone else with fit 3 to replace him, right? But you're going to free $2 million in cap space, and you get a 6th rounder. Now, for me, and I even said this, that we did a bonus episode this morning about the latest trade rumblings for Baltimore and kind of who Baltimore and what Baltimore is being linked to on the trade market. And I said on that show, I've said it for a while, and you've been with me for a little bit, you've heard me say it, right? The Ravens don't need all this draft capital. They have to be gearing up for something else. And we'll get into that a little bit more in the second part of the show as well. But you don't need all this draft capital. Right now, Brian, you have Brian notes that the Ravens could make a couple of different trades for a couple of different people. You could trade away a 5th for a guy like a Calais Campbell or Kevin Zeitler. Maybe it's a 2nd and a 5th for Bradley Chubb and a 6th rounder or something like that. And actually, let's do a little bit of quick research here. Ravens future draft picks. So Baltimore, again, the pick that they traded away, it was a 2027 7th rounder. They're getting back a pick in this year's draft for a pick in next year's draft. So right now, Baltimore is projected to have their 1 through 4s, right? So 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round. They also have their own 5th rounder plus the trade that they made during the draft with the Jets. So the Ravens got the Jets 5th rounder for this year in that draft day trade with the Jets. And they also got the Chargers 5th rounder in that Odafe Oweh deal, where they also traded away a 2027 7th rounder. So now the Ravens, they have 5 5th rounders. They're projected for 5 because they also are projected 2 comp picks in the 5th round for Patrick McCary and Brandon Stevens. In the 6th round, the Ravens, they moved that deal to that pick was to the Jets, but the Ravens now have gotten a 6th rounder back. So the Ravens are scheduled to have a 6th rounder this season, but their own 6th rounder has actually been traded, I believe, 6 times since the draft, which is kind of wild. But even still, the Ravens didn't have a 6th rounder in this draft before today. So they now got their 6th round pick back. And I'm going to say, for me personally, I don't need to see the Ravens pick 6 times in the 5th and 6th round. I don't need to see it. The Ravens have an opportunity to move off of these picks and make not just one trade, but multiple different trades now. And I get it, right? For Jaire, that could have been really big for them, especially if a guy like, Nate Wiggins went down, and thankfully he hasn't, or another one of those guys went down, but it just felt like he fell out, and maybe he wasn't even in it to begin with, right? But he fell out of the circle of trust with Baltimore after that Buffalo game. The injury kind of set things back for him. I'm curious to know what it would have been like if he never had the injury and could have, had training camp, and he probably wouldn't have played in the preseason, but he could have probably gotten off to a faster start. But my thing was, I wasn't sure what the plan was with Jaire, because I know that they wanted him available for January, but, if you want to get him available for January, you have to let him play in the system and play in the defense. And, the more this kind of went on without him playing and having him be a healthy scratch and him just not being out on the field, getting reps, the more it felt like, is there a plan here? Or is it just like they don't want him anymore? And clearly it was the latter. And now the Ravens have traded. I love Adam Schefter tweeted out other trades so far in recent weeks for the Ravens, and it's just one other trade. But the Ravens have now moved off of Odafe Oweh and Jaire Alexander and 2 7th rounders So that's the haul for the other teams. The Ravens have traded away Owe, Alexander, and 2 7th-rounders for a Loki Gilman, a 5th-rounder, and a 6th-rounder. So look, I think I wouldn't be shocked if Jaire went to Philly and played really well. I wouldn't be. He's going to have an opportunity for playing time there, and I wouldn't be shocked if he played well. But obviously, he has to stay on the field, which is, a really important thing to do. But, coming into the mini bye, Brian noted that the Ravens had a little over $14 million in cap space. Some of that has to be allocated to future injury replacements. You got the practice squad elevations, but this move freeing up $2 million more is going to give the Ravens even more room to operate. And so again, this is what we were kind of talking about. We talked about it on the show this morning, even and throughout the week of with Baltimore and, having the ability to make a couple of trades here. You can do that and still have full focus on Tuesday because there's no game tomorrow. The Ravens don't have to worry about, is a guy going to get injured or, what's going to happen? I mean, I guess they can watch some of their own trade targets, but you have multiple different avenues now to put your full focus on the trade deadline on Tuesday. And so while other teams are prepping for games and getting ready, the Ravens can just be wheeling and dealing, calling teams up and saying, hey, and I'm not saying that having a game on Sunday would have deterred the Ravens from making this move or anything. But again, I would have liked to see Jaire play snaps with the Ravens and see, because I feel like there wasn't really a chance given after the Buffalo game. And look, the Buffalo game was bad, right? Like we can all admit that. The Buffalo game was bad for Jaire. But I felt like he should have gotten a little bit more run with the Ravens. He was good depth to have. But if they weren't going to play him, they weren't going to play him. And if they weren't going to play him, they needed to trade him. And that's what I had said. That's what I've been pretty consistent on. So I'm glad they at least did that if they didn't have the plan. But I would have liked to see Jaire play because he played, I think the number was 61 snaps, right? 61 snaps for Jaire. I would have liked to see him get a little more run. Because, again, if it didn't work and it wasn't a fit and like this, then I think there was more of a reason to do it. But I think that Baltimore could have gotten away with not trading Jaire. It wasn't a huge contract to begin with. And, again, maybe it's just kind of me speaking because I wanted Jaire in Baltimore for, I started doing the show in 2019. I probably started talking about Jaire in, 2021 or 2022 about a guy. And that was obviously when he was younger and, he was widely considered one of the best guys in the league, really, since he came in. But I think that for Baltimore, I would have liked to see a little bit more run for him, but they trade him away. Baltimore getting a 6th-round pick back. I would like to see this as a holistic thing though for the deadline, right? I'm not gonna. I mean, we can do grades and whatnot and all that, but I want to make sure that we have the full picture on Tuesday. Because maybe the Ravens have been because again, there's a lot we can talk about with some of these other moves. So actually, coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to dive into that because the Ravens have been linked to a couple of different positions defensively, and maybe this move tells us a little bit more of a story about why they've been linked to certain positions. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We have a lot more coming your way here on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Mazda, and this episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. And this week's moment that moved the game forward, for me, it's that sequence. Again, you got special teams, defense, and offense all contributing for the Ravens in a win. Dolphins, you got Jordan Stout pinning the Dolphins deep in their own territory. Then you have Alohi Gilman forcing that fumble and Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews connection. Those are the types of things, team wins, team sequences. And for Baltimore being 3-5 now, they're going to need a lot more of those, but they've moved forward the last couple of weeks and looked a lot better. So hopefully that's had a positive outcome on the team. The fan base is probably feeling a little better. I know I am. So that's what keeps everybody moving forward. So when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. it keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And for me, I'm a big Never Nuggets guy. I'm a big Never Nuggets guy. And right now, over on FanDuel, Nuggets currently have the third best odds to win the championship at plus 700, only ahead of them are the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Look, I like what Denver did this offseason. Need a little time to gel, but I'm liking that number over on FanDuel. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Moving along on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, instantly reacting to the Ravens trading away Jaire Alexander. We've had all these conversations about who are the Ravens going to bring in, who are they going to bring in, and then they trade away a guy. So a little bit different than bringing in a piece to help you, but there are still some positives to that Jaire move, although again, as I've said, I would like to see him play a little bit more in a Baltimore uniform to see if it would have worked or not, but Baltimore clearly did not have a plan. We're 5 days a week plus more here on Locked On Ravens. So Monday through Friday, we have daily Ravens coverage and content with our regular show. Plus, we have these instant reaction shows after breaking news. We have Locked On Ravens watch-alongs during games, instant reactions after games, Locked On Ravens squad show twice a week with myself, Sam and Joku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. And actually, I think Sam is in here. He was in the chat. But all Kev, I hear you. I feel you, Sam. The instant reactions, that's what I do, the instant reactions, but Sam is with us twice a week on the squad show. I'm trying to see. Yep, here he is. Sam and I have been linked with Jaire Alexander. We both loved Jaire and we wanted him on the Ravens, and pretty big thud to end Jaire's tenure with the Ravens. So Sam and I both wanted him in Baltimore. We were both, we had an all-time celebration. We were loving it. And then to kind of see it go this way, definitely tough. So we're going to have you covered again. Any other rumors, news, trades that break will be covered here on Locked On Ravens. But man, let's start off here. If you're with us live, if you're with us after the fact in the comments and video form, if you're listening to us in audio form, let's do grades. What would you grade this trade for the Ravens? Jaire Alexander, A through F. A through F. You could even do an F- if you want to get in the spirit of Steve Saunders. You can do that too. I don't love it personally. Again, I would like to see Jaire have gotten more time. I'll give it a, depending on, I'm going to be a little more, I don't want to say positive, but I'm going to give it a little more leeway because I want to see what they do with the roster spot. If they do something good with the roster spot and the money saved, then I think it bumps up to probably just like a C, right? If that doesn't happen and they don't really make a ton of splash moves or they don't bring a guy in that makes an impact, it's probably like a D. So I'm going to give it a C- for now, not knowing what's happening on Tuesday. Once Tuesday passes, we can revisit the grade. But I don't think it's I don't love it. I don't think it's a great move. I think that depending on what happens, it can get better. But I think that the potential Jaire has when he's healthy and on the field, and I get the personnel packages. I get that it probably was, I don't want to say disconnect, but something probably happens. But if he wasn't going to play anyway, then okay. That's fine. I just wish we would have seen a little bit more with Jaire because I think Jaire is the third best corner on this team. I know people give Marlon a lot of flack, but I think Marlon's been playing all right to start. Since coming back, he's been playing all right, right? Before, it was a little bit of a slow start for Marlon at times, but I think he's been playing fine since coming back from the injury. I think Jaire had the potential to really slot in. He's an all-pro guy. He's really talented. So I'm going to give it a C- for now, not knowing what happens on Tuesday. If nothing crazy happens at the deadline and they could have used Jaire, then it's going to go down to a D for me. But if something does happen great, then I'm going to go and give it a C maybe. So I see a lot of D-, a lot of Ds. I see some C- in there as well. D-, F. Yep, I see. I get it. I understand it. I wish I would have played more, but I want to hold my final grade until I actually see what happens on Tuesday. I see Maverick here asking what happened to Jaire. Jaire's gone. Jaire traded. If you don't know the news, don't hear the news, or haven't heard it yet, Jaire Alexander traded to the Eagles. Ravens will trade Jaire and a 7th rounder for a 6th rounder. So he is out. And I see Brian saying PFF said Jaire played 49 snaps. 49 snaps. And yeah, I see Kwame saying he's going to be a beast with the Eagles. Wouldn't be shocked. Wouldn't be shocked at all. I think he's still super talented. And to have that guy as a depth, we can just revisit all the conversations we had in the offseason, right? To have that guy as a depth piece for your team is great. Like, even if he doesn't play a lot, even if he's not like prime Jaire Alexander, having a guy that can maybe even be 75% of that would have been really, really big. And I see people asking why even sign him if they're not going to use him. I definitely wasn't expected to go this way. I think the injury in training camp caused a lot of this. I think the Buffalo game caused a lot of this, but I don't think he got enough of a chance in Baltimore here, if we're being honest. I don't. So this hopefully opens up a move for a D lineman, for an edge, hopefully an O lineman, because again, I had said that the Ravens would probably make 1 to 2 trades, with maybe 1 being what I expect, but 2 being realistic. I expect at least 2 moves now. And what could those moves be? Because again, the Ravens, I have an extremely hard time believing that the Ravens are just gearing up with all this draft capital to not make a move. Right. I have such a hard time believing they're not going to go out there and make a move or two because of where they are now, being 3-5 and having the schedule they have, the division being the way that it is. I mean, I just I don't see it. I feel like they have to make a couple moves. Now, the Ravens, we talked about this on this morning show. And if you want to go back and listen to this morning show, we talk a lot about where the insiders are linking the Ravens in terms of positionally, but to kind of give the lowdown on that, the Ravens have been linked to defensive help left and right. Albert Breer reporting on Friday that the Ravens are looking at edge guys. We've heard the Ravens being linked to cornerback help, on the D line, just general defensive help. That's what the Ravens are being open to, apparently. But maybe this move maybe shows us something about why the Ravens have been linked to corners in the first place. I mean, they clearly didn't trust Jaire Alexander. Maybe they want to bring in another corner because they want a guy they can trust more. Now, do I think the Ravens, shouldn't have trusted Jaire? I mean, I get it after the Buffalo game, but there wasn't enough sample size for me to say, oh, Jaire, completely didn't earn the trust, or he completely lost that trust. So I think that if they trade for a corner now, it would essentially be them trading out someone they didn't trust for them trading for someone they did. I believe if they trade for another corner, it wouldn't be a player to the caliber of Jaire. Because I think right now, again, there's not a lot of room for reserve corner play right now with the way the Ravens are deploying their safeties. But at the same time, I mean, you have to really hope that Nate and Marlon can finish this season. I mean, Chidobe Awuzie is fine, but if Nate or Marlon isn't able to go or finish the year, and look, knock on wood, we're knocking on wood right now that the Ravens will be as healthy as possible. But we know injuries happen. It's football, right? The Ravens have 9 weeks of football to go. If Nate were to miss a game or two, like, Jaire would have been great to just plug in there and play him. But felt like that's not going to be what would have happened even anyway, because they didn't have a plan for him. So, yeah. And I see people, if they trade for a corner, going to lose. Yeah, I see Love you saying that. I get it. Like, I wouldn't trade for another corner. I would focus on the trenches. I think that's what you have to do. And I see a lot of people talking about, I see Skip Mode talking about Quinnen Williams and Bradley Chubb. I see people talking about Dexter Lawrence. I did see the Max Crosby stuff in the chat a little earlier. Crosby's not available, I don't think. And even if so, the Ravens, I would trade for him. I would trade first rounders for him, but that's just not the Ravens' MO. I think for me, the absolute dream, and I've said this for about a month here on this show, Kevin Zeitler on the O-line. That's the first move, all right? Daniel Falele out, Kevin Zeitler in. I think it improves the whole offensive line. You can probably trade a 5th rounder, maybe even that 6th rounder for Kevin Zeitler. These are guys like him, Calais Campbell, maybe Matt Judon. Like, these are guys that are probably going to be 1-year rentals, probably, at least for Zeitler and Campbell, probably retiring after the season, maybe have 1 more year after this left in him. Who knows? Judon, I don't know his situation in terms of how much he has left in the tank. But those are the guys you can get for relatively cheap and feel good about them being immediate impact. I mean, Campbell's having a really solid year in Arizona right now. And again, who's to say he wants to leave Arizona? Who's to say, Zeitler wants to pack up and move again? But if I'm those guys, I want a chance to compete. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. Now, you could also look on the D-line with Campbell. People are talking about the Williams, the Lawrences, the Jeffrey Simmons. Like, those would be bigger swings. Would I trade a first-round pick for any of those guys? No, I wouldn't trade a first-round pick for any of those guys. But I would trade like a 2nd and a 5th, 2nd and a 4th, guys that you can put on the interior, take some pressure off of Travis Jones, right? Like, that would be really helpful. Outside linebacker wise, I feel like Kayvon Thibodeau is probably a pretty solid in the middle option where you probably could trade away like a 4th rounder for him, maybe a 4th and a 5th rounder, right? That could be something. You know, I see people talk about Jermaine Johnson. If Will McDonald were available, that'd be a great move. I just don't think the Jets are going to make Will McDonald available. Apparently, Arden Key is also going to be available here. So there are some other moves that could happen with Tennessee. But those are the types of teams you have to target, right? It's the teams that aren't going anywhere. And the teams that are probably, as the days tick down to the deadline, because I can't remember who said it. I think it was an insider. I can't remember which insider said it. But, you know, there are a lot of players you hear about maybe a month out to like, you know, beginning of October, a month out from the deadline, who you hear, are they're untouchable, going to take like a couple of day 2 picks to move, or, you know, price is too high. But then as those teams become more and more irrelevant, and as the deadline gets closer and closer, all of a sudden the asking prices start to soften. And it becomes a situation where all of a sudden teams are saying, well, no, we kind of don't have a choice, especially for guys who are going to be pending free agents. So if I'm the Ravens, you can make a move or two, and you can make a decently sized splash move, and then maybe a couple of other moves around the margins. There might be guys that get cut after the deadline that look for new opportunities. I don't know how that would maybe work for them, but I feel like the Ravens have to be gearing up for more moves, trading away Jaire Alexander, who, again, is a good depth piece at cornerback. You now move off of him for a 6th rounder. You have to make some moves with this draft capital. And I saw it earlier in the chat. People saying that, well, how many picks are going to actually make this roster? How many picks are actually going to make the roster? I had that conversation all last year with the draft class for Baltimore. Actually, I have the graphic still. I have the graphic still from the draft class. Where is it? Well, here we go. Here, I still have the draft class graphic where the Ravens picked 11 players. And I said all the way through, the Ravens do not have enough room on this roster for 11 players. You want to move off of some of that, maybe trade up in the draft for other guys. And lo and behold, 3 guys didn't make the roster, 2 due to unfortunate injuries, and 1, Garrett Dellinger gets cut. You know, it's a waste of capital, a waste of assets, in my opinion. Move off of some of these, get guys in the building that can help you win now and maybe even a couple of years in the future. I don't know, depending on the move you make. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll keep talking about where the Ravens go from here. We'll keep talking about, you know, where the Ravens could even trade for and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way here on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Rugiet. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. When it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNFL so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. We return. It's our final segment here of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you as we dive into the Ravens trading away Jaire Alexander to the Philadelphia Eagles. So I appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We have 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage and content for you. And we are going to be talking a lot of trade over the next couple of days, right? Because the Ravens, they should be gearing up to make moves. So we have our regular show 5 days a week. We have instant reaction shows. We have the whole 9 yards with it. So if you want daily Ravens coverage, be sure you tap in here to Locked On Ravens. You can follow me on social media, ChaosStriker34, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And if you have a friend or a family member who wants daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them our way on Locked On Ravens. But let's get into it. Continuing to talk about trade targets and where the Ravens could go from here. And I'm curious, if you're in the chat with us, if you're in the comments after the fact in video form, if you're even listening in audio form, you can message it to me on social media. You can message it to me anyway. But who are your top trade targets? Put them in the chat, put them in the comments, message them to me. Who are your top trade targets? I'm very curious because, I have mine. Like I have a few that I can get into, but I'm curious where everybody else kind of is on this, because there are probably like 10 to 15 guys that are pretty realistic for Baltimore when it comes to where they could actually make the move. Obviously, the three positions that we have talked about are on the offensive line as well as defensive line and edge rusher, but I don't know. It feels like Zeitler is one. I see Zeitler in there. I see Laura say Max Crosby. I would love it. Spirit bomb Myles Garrett for 7 5th-round picks. Send it in. Send it in. Send it in. Yeah, I see Vontae saying, agreeing with Tanya about what she said about Jaire, and I want to bring this up. Maybe Jaire wasn't showing he still had it, and the Ravens were making a deal for a real impact player. If Jaire was that good, they would have been playing him. And that's kind of what we were talking about. And I totally agree with you there, Tanya, where it's like, I would have loved to see Jaire get a little more run. But if they didn't have a plan, if they didn't feel confident or comfortable, the best thing they could do was trade him away, clear up the cap space, free up a roster spot, and get another pick that you could move off of for someone else. Because if they were just going to kind of have him waste away on the roster, what good does that do for anybody? It does nothing. It does nothing for anybody. So it's disappointing because I think that he still could have made an impact, but the Ravens clearly saw something different. Oh, I see Emil saying Azeez Ojulari. That's a name we talked about all trade deadline last year. That's what we talked about all trade deadline last year. Let's see what else we have in here in the chat. Fitzpatrick and Phillips. Fitzpatrick would be really interesting. I mean, I don't feel like he's a guy that the Dolphins are going to move off of, but Jalen Phillips, I would love a guy like Jalen Phillips. I see Fernando saying Bradley Chubb. Where else? We got Zeitler from TGIF, Quinnen Williams from Ray, Kayvon Thibodeau, Jalen Phillips, Calais Campbell, Zeitler, and I guess Arik Woolen. Bring everybody. Bring everybody in. Yeah, as defensive interior, we got Quinnen Williams. So those are the types of moves. Again, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a blockbuster of all blockbusters here for the Ravens. I don't expect that to happen. But I would, at this point in time, I would want them to make one medium to good size splash move, whether it be Quinnen Williams or, one of the Bradley Chubb, like one of those guys. And then 1 to 2, ideally 2, but maybe more realistically 1 to 2 smaller yet impactful moves like a Zeitler, like a Calais Campbell, like a Judon, those types of guys that I think you can bring in for relatively cheap contractually as well as draft capital wise. Because again, there are some guys that do have a pretty hefty contract. I know Chubb has a contract and a couple of these other guys are going to be kind of interesting to bring in. So I see Kwame saying Justin Simmons, maybe sign him. Baltimore safety-wise is probably good right now, but it doesn't hurt to have depth anywhere, right? And that's kind of the Jaire thing, is like he was good depth, but, it's interesting to kind of see like how the Ravens view a certain player with Jaire in this case versus how everybody else views that player. I see Emil saying Jacoby Myers. I think the Ravens are probably good receiver-wise. I feel like Jacoby, is that like the Olaves, the Jacoby Myers, Rashid Shaheeds, like those guys? I could see Pittsburgh. I could see New England. I could see Buffalo. Maybe a few other teams. Denver's maybe an option. But Baltimore, I think, feels okay with their receivers right now, especially with they're not really getting D-Hop on the field as much as I would like. And I feel like a guy like Myers, while talented, would take away from that as well. Yeah, I see Zeitler. Yep, a lot of that. So the corner depth is interesting now, though. I see Kwame talking about that, where you have Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, Jadobia Awuzie, TJ Tampa, Keon Martin, and then a couple of guys on the practice squad. This actually would have been pretty solid to have CJ Gardner-Johnson, who I forgot to mention signed with the Bears a couple of days ago. He would be more of a slot guy instead of an outside guy. But even still, like secondary depth is now certainly something the Ravens, it makes a lot more sense now than it did an hour ago or 2 hours ago, right? It makes a lot more sense now considering they traded away Jaire than it would have 2 days ago when Jaire was still on the roster. So I just, for Baltimore right now, you need to make a move or two. You're bringing guys in, all right? No more trading guys away, all right? We got to be done with that. Trading guys to bring into Baltimore, offensive line, defensive line, edge. Those are the three positions. Doesn't really make sense. I mean, corner now makes a little more sense like I talked about, but other than that, you really have a path where I don't know if there's another alignment I would trade for outside of Zeitler. I heard, I think someone said it in the chat a couple days ago, maybe in the watch along, that the Saints might make Cesar Ruiz available. That could be a potential option for them, but Zeitler just makes so much sense. So does Campbell, so does a guy like a Jalen Phillips or a Judon or a Chubb. Like, you realistically, if you made 3 moves with the Ravens, 1 offensive line, 1 defensive line, and 1 on the edge, I'd be feeling really, really, really good about that. So I hope they do. I hope that, we can react to a trade where the Ravens are bringing somebody in, where they're not trading somebody away. I assume that's going to come here in the near future, but of course we'll have everything you need, whether it be rumors, insiders linking the Ravens to people or positions, or other trades. We'll have you covered here on Locked On Ravens. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Again, Jaire Alexander traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. Jaire in a 7th for a 6th rounder. But thank you again for tuning in. That's all I got for you. We are here for you Monday through Friday, plus more with bonus content, instant reaction episodes, and so much more on Locked On Ravens. So if you want daily Ravens coverage, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form. We're back here with a bonus episode tomorrow talking more about this deal and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.